What's going on, everyone? Fearless Football Forecast. We are back with you. It's episode 6. We're rolling through more divisions today. Today, we're going to be covering both the NFC and the AFC West. Last week, if you didn't hear, we did the AFC and NFC South, so go check that one out. By the way, just for everyone on YouTube that's just starting to watch this right now, if you're on the go click our Spotify link that is down below. If not, and you want to see our beautiful faces, continue to watch it through this way.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get into the West divisions this time around. The South was, while I think every division is going to be pretty competitive this year, the two South divisions are kind of a little bit depressing in the grand scheme of things. I think we'll be getting into a little bit more competition in this episode.
Yeah, definitely going to be talking about some playoff teams, and we're going to grind through the news as we usually do. There were a lot of signings this week. First and foremost, Saquon Barkley ended up signing for a 1-year, $11 million deal with a $2 million signing bonus. So in reality, Saquon threatened to hold out and only ended up making about $500,000 more than what his franchise tag had originally implied. So, I mean, I guess it makes sense since the original report came out saying that they weren't too far off of a deal. But as a Saquon dynasty owner and someone who would love to draft Saquon this year in general for fantasy football, I think it's good. And obviously it's great for the Giants to be able to have their RB1.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of weird. One thing I was thinking about, I would love to see all the faces of the people that were in that Zoom meeting, all the running backs that were like, we have to stand our ground. And then they just throw Saquon an extra $500,000 in incentives and he signs the deal. I mean, listen, at the end of the day with these running backs, it's not going to change. There's going to be inequity at positions. I think that Saquon is being pretty fairly paid considering he's been hurt multiple times. I mean, the talent is there, like you said, really important for the Giants. And I think moving forward, really important for Saquon because if he can put together a full healthy season, I would expect that, I think there was probably some background negotiations going on like, hey, listen, maybe I don't sign for that much more, but you're not going to franchise tag me next year. Now, that's more of a said thing than put in ink. Like that can't be guaranteed in a contract. That's more of a got to trust your word type deal. But I think that moving forward, it's better for him. With that in mind, I think that next year, if he can stay healthy, he might end up getting a longer term deal.
Yeah, it's probably going to happen, and will probably be heavily based on how the Giants perform as a whole to see if they need him or if they're just going to continue to rebuild. And next up, we had cornerback on my team, Stefon Diggs, end up signing a 5-year, $91 million contract. And at first I saw it and I was like, it's a little bit too much. But then I realized he's not the highest paid corner. I mean, he doesn't deserve to be, but just the current NFL market right now, everyone is going to be getting overpaid if you want to keep on to these players. What I do like about it, though, is that the majority of the money is coming in the next 2 years, which allows us to sign some free agents after we lose some other key players from the current roster. And it's kind of just extending the Super Bowl window for the Cowboys a little bit. Obviously, it's going to be very hard with the Eagles being in the same division, but as much hate as a lot of people can talk on Diggs, he's still one of the better zone corners. Obviously, he gets burnt in man situations a lot, and I think that with Gilmore there now, who now we have inked up for at least another 2 years, it's going to be great to have both of those guys. And Diggs, I mean, yes, he does let up a lot of yards, but he makes up for it in his interceptions, and he's a great tackler as well. So we're going to have to see. I'm not too upset about it. When I first saw it, like I said, I was a little triggered. But overall, I think it's a good signing, and it's good that they got it out of the way this year since next year we're probably going to have to sign a lot of bigger deals like with Parsons.
Yeah, and that your last point is really what I was going to make. Looking into it, every guy that's going to get paid now is going to want to be paid, among the top money in a position. So for the Cowboys not to have to pay him number one corner money, is good. And I agree with you. I don't think he's the best corner in the league. But the biggest thing is, like you said, it's more of a front-loaded contract. And I think next year they're going to get into the Micah Parsons side of things, where that's the contract that they're going to have to kind of push out a little bit more because he's going to get a boatload of cash,
Oh, and
which he deserves.
talk about a boatload of cash. Justin Herbert now signed his big deal, and it came out of nowhere at a very late time. But we're going to talk about that more once we actually get to the Chargers. So right now we're going to hop into the NFC West. We're going to be talking today in the order that they finished last year. Another big news to kick things off with the first team in the 49ers, Nick Bosa is holding out.
Yeah, this one was kind of weird. I mean, I get it. It's kind of it's smart to, in a sense, to make sure you get paid. You don't want to, he's torn his ACL before. You don't want to risk it. I think even if he were to get hurt, they were going to pay him either way. But honestly, if I'm the Niners, I'd rather pay him now anyway. The edge rushing position is a position that is not going to get cheaper by any means. I'd rather sign him before the Cowboys sign Parsons, and then Bosa's like, hey, he got this. Now I want this. Um, I think that they'll get a deal done fairly quickly. The only thing that I found strange about this is I really don't know if he had to hold out, because they with the new CBA holding out of training camp, you can't get that money refunded at the end. Like the teams used to be able to say, all right, here, you can have it back. Now you can't do that. I think that John Lynch is smart enough to know that Nick Bosa is probably the most important piece on his team. When you really think about it, he is the most important piece on the team, in my opinion. I think they would have found a way to get a deal done. So in that part is strange to me, but I think this will be, in a week or two, we'll be like, all right, Bosa's got a deal. He deserves it. He's back, that kind of thing.
Yeah, he's going to be paid. I mean, you can tell that Lynch really values the D line, especially this year. They got Javon Hargrave from the Eagles, which was a great free agent signing for them. And if you think about it, the Niners last year were possibly a Brock Purdy injury away from a Super Bowl. I mean, they were rolling. Brock Purdy technically still undefeated right now, even though he's injured. Darnold was brought in this year, and apparently he's competing with Trey Lance for the backup position and may start week 1 if Purdy isn't healthy. My thing with the Niners is I do like who they brought in. It's going to just be down to, is Purdy the truth, or was he just so efficient because no one really had any tape on him because he was such a late pick? And that's why this year I'm a little scared for the Niners. Also, this is the third straight year that Shanahan's lost a coordinator. Bringing in Steve Wilks now as the new defensive coordinator this year, who is a pretty solid defensive coordinator. I don't think they're going to get that much worse, but to lose your offensive and defensive coordinator back-to-back years, it definitely can hurt the core of the team. But that's why they brought in some signings. But I don't know. I'm a little worried about the Niners. I still think they get it done this year in the division, but as like one of the upper echelon teams in the NFC, I see them dropping maybe from second to third or fourth this year.
Yeah, so I kind of view the Niners basically the same as they were last year. Like you said, biggest question is going to be Purdy. He got cleared to throw and to practice, so we'll see if, just because you're cleared doesn't mean you're fully ready to go out there and compete to be a starting quarterback. I think that Brock Purdy is obviously, everyone wants a Patrick Mahomes type quarterback, but I think Brock Purdy is the perfect quarterback for Kyle Shanahan. He's going to go out there. He's going to he's going to know where everybody's going to be at every moment. And he's going to just follow the reads as Shanahan put it forward. And he's not, I wouldn't say he's mobile, but he can move around enough to where when things go a little haywire, he can extend a play from time to time. One of the bigger losses for me in this offseason was McGlinchey. Losing that tackle play, little scary, because is that offensive line going to be able to be it's not going to be as good more than likely, but will it be able to stay good enough to where Purdy's not getting pressured consistently? Because if he's getting pressured consistently, he's just not going to be what he was last year. But I think that Kyle Shanahan is a good enough coach to know where his team is weak. He'll have Kittle line up inside if his tackle is playing poorly in a game, get some chip blocks laid down. I'm pretty excited for the Niners just to watch them, because they are one of those teams that's like, they're not necessarily interesting to watch, but they execute so well that they do make it fun to watch. You know what I mean? I think that they're going to win the division again. Well, I probably shouldn't have said that because we were going to get into it at the end of the video, but I do. I think it's going to be more of the same from them. Maybe not as dominant. I see them taking a slight step back, um, but I think their defense is going to be very similar to what it was last year. And I think that the offense, potentially could be healthier because multiple players missed multiple weeks last year. Um, so I think that the offense could be, not better, but right around the same. They were a great offense. So I think that they're going to be just as good as they were last year.
And next up, we got the Seattle Seahawks, who are a very interesting team. They really are because, again, a situation where their quarterback is possibly holding them back. Even though he played lights out last year, the question is just, can Geno Smith do it again? That's really what it comes off to. But I really, really like what they did this offseason. They got a mix of veterans and then some younger players who just weren't able to start because of how good their teams were that they were on. They added Mario Edwards, Draymond Jones, Jaron Reed, Bobby Wagner returning to the team, Devin Bush and Julian Love to this roster that already had a solid defense. I love their draft. They got in Devin Witherspoon, Jackson Smith and Jigba now, which should hopefully make it impossible for Geno Smith to play bad. I even like their second-round picks at Derek Hall and Zach Charbonnet. They did lose some key players, but Charbonnet pretty much replaces Rashad Penny. I think the biggest loss for them is going to be Shelby Harris. They also lost L.J. Collier, Poona Ford, Bruce Irvin, and Jonathan Abram. So the Seahawks, if they had a different quarterback, you would just look at the roster and the coach and pretty much think that they're a 10-win team. But the question is just, can Geno replicate what he did last year? And if Geno plays the way that he played last year, and now they can add Njigba to be pretty dynamic out of the slot, probably open up Tyler Lockett down deep. And if Kenneth Walker can rush the way that he did last year, they could be a pretty great team. They could be like an 11 or 12 win team. But on the flip side, Geno Smith can play the way that he's played 90% of his career in the NFL, and we could be looking come week 8 at a team that's like 2-6, and maybe only ends up getting about 7 wins this season. So for me, it's a flip of the coin with this team.
Yeah, I think that they're going to be one of those teams that is consistently in every game, and it's just going to be, are they going to have good luck on their side like the Vikings did last year, or are they going to have, bad luck on their side like the Broncos, although the Broncos offense sucked last year, but, are they going to be good or are they going to be bad in those one-score games? It's weird. They lost, a decent bit of players, but they also, like you mentioned, they gained a lot of pieces that I liked. Bringing Bobby Wagner back, you got to love that just for the culture. But I really liked their draft. I didn't love that they took Charbonnet in the second round, but I mean, now that you look at it, just because it's not the best draft pick, he's still a good player. And when you look at the roster as a whole, I just think that Geno Smith is another one of those guys who has shown efficiency pretty consistently the past year and a half, even when he filled in for Russell Wilson. I think he'll continue to be fairly efficient coming into this next year. Like you add, like you said, JSN to this offense. I mean, DK, Lockett, Charbonnet, even Noah Fant as a tight end is, that it's a solid receiving tight end weapon. And then, the running back Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker, that's one of the more nasty two-headed running back duos in the league. So I think that it's just going to be so hard to – there's not like one phase of the game that you can try and lock out. Like if you focus on the run game, I think Geno will be able to have, open passes. If you try and not have as many people in the box, they're going to be able to gash all game long. This Seahawks, it's funny because I do think that the Seahawks can be good enough to compete with the 49ers this year. That's one of the main differences I have between this year and last year. While the Seahawks were good, I never truly thought they'd be in a position to compete. This year, I do see if they can win on the margins, I could see them competing. Really, the last thing I wanted to mention, the Devin Witherspoon thing, where I just saw this today, where he's not showing up in camp right now. Obviously, I'm not an NFL player. You could probably tell by my physique. But if I was an NFL player, that would really piss me off. Like, I know that you were a
Because
top
it's a
10 pick.
rookie. Yeah.
Yeah, I know you were a top 10 pick and you were great in college, but where you're getting picked, you've been allotted a certain amount of money. You're really debating guarantees and signing bonus. And at the end of the day, the NFL is so much different than college. We've seen it many, 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 many times. Um, I don't know. That would kind of fire me up, but that's just a weird thing. I imagine they'll get that figured out by the end of the season, um, or by the end of training camp, obviously. But
Yeah,
I
he
think
should be
that,
signed.
yeah, I think that the defense is good, and I think that the offense is, I think they're both like right around average to above average. So I think that they'll be, competitive, like I said, week in, week out. And this two-headed, to me, this division is a two-headed race, and I think it's going to really come down to the end this year. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, if Geno can step it up, I mean, and originally I was a little concerned for Kenneth Walker's production this year, but now looking at it, I really think that they just reached on Charbonnet because they knew he was an incredible talent, and they just lost Rashad Penny, who we both like as a player and for fantasy this year. So in reality, Kenneth
Very much.
Walker didn't start the season until about the second half. He still finished with 1,050 yards and 9 touchdowns. And for a lot of that time, Rashad Penny was also available. So I don't see it as much as a 60-40 now that I originally thought. I think it'll be more of like a 75-25 sort of thing. And as a fantasy owner of Kenneth Walker, I feel a little bit better now after just realizing that they really just didn't have anyone else at the running back position. I do think that Charbonnet is an incredible talent and will probably poach some touchdowns, but the touchdown efficiency of Kenneth Walker is through the roof. If Geno Smith can't be good on this offense, like you said, they just have so many weapons. That'll be what it comes down to. Personally, I could see this team competing with the Niners if their D line can gel, because I know that there's a lot of new pieces in the front seven. If I think that's what it really comes down to, other than Geno as well. Because last year they were a team that wasn't really getting beat over the top. But if you were able to kind of slash and dash them, that's how you beat them. And clearly they wanted to address that this year. And it just comes down to if they were actually able to capitalize on that. And up next, a team that I'm pretty sure we have pretty split opinions on this year in the Los Angeles Rams. They didn't really have any offseason additions because of all the money that they spent. It's kind of like they sacrificed their souls for that Super Bowl a couple years ago. Their only offensive addition the entire year was Demarcus Robinson. They didn't have any early draft picks. I did like their first pick, though, with Steve Avila. I thought he was pretty high rated for his position. They had some key losses, too. The aforementioned Bobby Wagner, Jalen Ramsey, who ended up getting traded to the Dolphins, Leonard Floyd, who's now on the Bills, Ashawn Robinson, and Allen Robinson, even though Robinson was a complete bust on the team. There's also not a lot of depth. So just how we mentioned the X factor for the other two teams was the quarterback play. In this case, the X factor is, does one of the studs on either the offense or the defense get hurt? Because if Aaron Donald gets injured, if Matt Stafford gets injured, if Cooper Kupp gets injured, that's when this team goes from possibly hitting their over to under. I think out of any team in the league right now, their over under is so exact because it's if they stay healthy, they should hit that over at 6.5 right now. And if they have one piece that goes down, they're not winning 7 games. So I want to know what you think about them. Like I said, they had some key losses. They were older players, though. And for me, I just really trust McVay and trust Matthew Stafford, even though he's being a little bit of a diva right now, not wanting to take a pay cut so they can get any free agents. But at the end of the day, Matt Stafford wasn't healthy last year. When he was, they were facing some high level teams. They had the Bills in week 1. It just didn't seem like a good script for them last season. They never really got their flow going. They brought in Allen Robinson, who didn't produce. But that tandem with Kupp and Stafford is pretty hard to disagree with. And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to you is Cam Akers actually finished the season with 300-yard performances. So if they can flip that momentum and become more of a run-first team, which I know McVay would probably like to do, that could make them a little bit more dangerous than I think a lot of people were expecting.
Yeah, so my problem with the Rams is, well, just to start off, their line for the over/under season total, I would stay away from it because I think it's pretty accurate. I think they'll be a 6-7 win team. But gun to my head, I have to pick one. I would take the under. So here's my problem: the Rams, and we've all known this. The Rams have been the past 4 or 5 years have been a team with amazing stars, no depth. They got rid of Jalen Ramsey, who is a star, Bobby Wagner, who borderline star, but one of their better players, and Leonard Floyd, who is their second best defensive lineman. So now they're even weaker with their starters. I saw something today. Their entire secondary is like first and second year players. Like last year, one of their starting corners, I forget what it is, but one of their top 3 listed corners as of right now, he played 7 snaps last year, or that might have been linebackers. But like literally, they're everywhere they're playing is new guys. It's all first, second year in the secondary. It's newer linebackers. I think that this team, I actually don't mind for fantasy. I think they'll have to pass a lot. Aaron Donald's great, but he can't take down all 5 defensive linemen at one time. And quite honestly, I think offenses are just going to say, lock up Aaron Donald as much as you can, which obviously he'll still get his because he's amazing. But if their focus is on Aaron Donald, there's literally no one else to me on defense that is scary. And, every year there's later round guys who come out of the woodworks, and maybe they'll have some star that we don't know about as of right now. But I really don't see it. Stafford, for fantasy, I wouldn't touch, but I love Cooper Kupp. I think there's a chance he could be the wide receiver 1, honestly, because I think they're going to have to pass so much, and there's a chance he could get like 28% of the target share. I don't even mind Higbee because, in my opinion, for fantasy, it's just very consolidated. I'll take Higbee, Akers, or Kupp. I think all 3 of them will at the very least live up to ADP or like slightly behind, because Kupp's going at like 4th receiver. So he might finish wide receiver 6 or something like that. So that's where I would go fantasy wise. Other than that, I'm not touching this team anywhere fantasy wise. I'm not touching this team anywhere winning games. I just don't see it going very well for them. And I quite honestly think that it's funny. I was saying that I think the Niners and Seahawks are kind of going to be competitive. I can see the Rams and Cardinals being competitive for being horrible, quite honestly. It's just that, like you said, they do have the Stafford, Kupp, Donald trio of stars that, kind of gives them a slight edge.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you about Cooper Kupp. I think that he's going to be ecstatic this year for fantasy. The good thing with the Rams is they get a lot of their hard matchups out of the way in the beginning, and that's kind of when they're going to be learning to gel. They play the Bengals and Eagles and Niners within the first 4 weeks of the season. It'll be good to, get them out of the way, get those early losses out of the way, and then kind of be a team that picks up steam later in the year. Cam Akers might be one of the steals in fantasy this year. I keep thinking about it more and more. And like you said, to your point about the defense not being as good, I think that's going to be part of the reason why McVay leans a little bit more on the run game, because his strategy as coach is probably going to be to keep them off the field as much as possible. That way, with Donald there, he can kind of rally the troops and inspire these younger players. Hey, if you're playing half the time, make sure to double your effort, and then with them off the field more often, they're a little bit healthier. I think they should hit the 7. I'm just going to trust the coach, the organization, Stafford, and Aaron Donald, really, in order to get enough wins, because I think that they will beat bad teams because of just the coaching, really.
Right.
Last year, it's pretty hard when you have Baker Mayfield to win games. They were even in a lot of games that they probably shouldn't have been and then just couldn't convert because of a late turnover. So I don't think the team is as bad as most people are saying. With teams that just won a Super Bowl and still have a couple players from that Super Bowl on it, it's harder for me to count them out than, let's say, a team that was just bad last year and maybe added some free agency pieces. Like, in my opinion, I'd rather take the team that's been there. But we shall see. I think they win more than the Cardinals unless the Cardinals start winning when Kyler comes back, which I could see because when Kyler Murray's healthy, the Cardinals team's actually not that bad. Their defense is pretty solid. I absolutely love their draft. I thought it was great that bringing in Paris Johnson. I know we were both very high on him. I think he was my favorite offensive line prospect this year. I like B.J. Olawari, Garrett Williams. Both of us like Michael Wilson and John Gaines. They did lose a lot, though. They lost DeAndre Hopkins, Robbie Anderson, A.J. Green. So there goes that receiving core. And then Justin Pugh, Cody Ford, Rodney Hudson, Zach Allen, Marcus Golden, and Byron Murphy. Plus, add on to that Kyler Murray's not going to be there for at least the first 4 weeks of the season. It will probably be 6 to 8 weeks that he ends up missing. This team's probably not going to win many games in the first half of the season. They might be unwinnable for a while, actually.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to be very good this year. So I agree. I would lean Rams over the Cardinals because they do have guys that you can lean on in a tough situation. Like, say the Cardinals are in a situation down 3 and they need to get a stop or they need to make a drive, something like that. I think that the stars on the Rams will do it for them. The Cardinals, I like Paris Johnson, like you said, extremely athletic. I think hopefully by the time Kyler gets back, he's comfortable with playing offensive line in the NFL, and he's good. I imagine by the end of the year he'll be a good offensive lineman. But in that list of players that you named, 3 of their offensive linemen left. So it takes more than one offensive lineman. I know that they have the tackle on the right side still. His name is escaping me right now. He's solid. I wouldn't say he's great by any means, but he's good enough. So their tackle play should be good. But I'm still concerned about the offensive line. And quite honestly, well, first off, people are saying that as of right now, they think Clayton Tune might be the starting quarterback, which that's just the Cardinals coming out and saying, "We'll take the first pick, please." At least Colt McCoy would give them a half of a chance to win the game. You know what I mean? Because I wouldn't say that he's great by any means, but I'd say he's solid enough to play football in the NFL. I don't know about Clayton Tune. I guess we'll find out. But I just don't see. They lost. They lost Byron Murphy, who was one of their better defensive players. I think that the defense is going to be, bottom half of the league, maybe bottom third of the league, and I think the offense not being great is just going to make that 5 times worse. So I see a scenario where the defense is horrible, in part because the offense sucks. They have Jonathan Gannon as a head coach, so he's not an offensive guy. He's not going to be able to outcoach the talent level of the quarterback or anything like that. And, once Kyler Murray comes back, there are some guys who, you saw with Adrian Peterson the year he tore his ACL game 1, he was just same old AP. But for a lot of guys, when you come back from an injury like that, even if you're not thinking about it, you are subconsciously thinking about it. So I think that Kyler Murray, even when he gets back, let's say he gets back week 5, he only misses the 4 games. I still see there being another month or so of him just getting comfortable. And then after that, even when he is comfortable, I like Kyler Murray. Let's say by week 10, Kyler Murray is back. I still don't see a world where he's backpacking this entire team to being as good as they were 2 years ago when he was in consideration for MVP before he got hurt. And that's another thing. Let's not forget, last year wasn't his first injury. He got hurt, the year he was going to be in contention for MVP. He gets hurt last year. So I just think that this team is going to be an absolute dumpster fire.
Probably for at least another 2 years.
exactly. I had Jonathan Gannon for the Philadelphia Eagles defense. There were some things I liked. You prefer to only rush 4 people if your defense is good enough for it, but he just never adjusted. It was just like, all right, we're gonna send 4, and we're gonna hope for the best. So like even those games where we were getting torched, like there was just no pressure, or not no pressure, but there was no added blitzers, which is something you have to be able to adjust. So I'm not convinced that Gannon is going to be a good coach either. So that just makes it that much worse. I kind of think it might be one of those scenarios where they brought Jonathan Gannon in, although they gave him a pretty nice contract. So maybe I'm talking out of my ass, but I don't know. I feel like
What, as a
in my head,
scapegoat?
yeah, as a scapegoat, so they can bring him in for a year, say, oh, that's why we suck. Hopefully,
No,
they hope
I
they get
mean,
the
it's not like anyone's expecting them to be good. Gannon should probably have a free pass. Most people are expecting them to have less than 3 wins. The biggest total right now on them is 4.5 wins. And I
yeah.
think the under on that hits unless Kyler can miraculously come back a little bit earlier in the season.
Jonathan Gannon fired by not this season, next season, mid-season. Jonathan Gannon
Next season,
fired.
mid-season, yeah, because they probably won't
Calling
have their shit together by then.
him.
So here we go. Before we get into the West, on the AFC side, we're gonna go through our predictions. I guess I'll go first. As much as I hate it, I'm gonna go chalk here and go Niners first, Seahawks second, but probably within like 1 win or 2 wins. I think it'll be like Niners go down a little bit. Last year they had like 12 wins. This year I think they have 10. I'd say Seattle gets about 9 or 8 wins. Rams in third with like 7, and then Cardinals at the bottom with maybe 2 or 3 wins.
Yeah, so I see the division the exact same way. Niners, Seahawks, Rams, Cardinals. I think that the Seahawks will give the Niners a run for their money at the top of the division. I think the Rams are going to give the Cardinals a run for their money at the bottom of the division.
And now we're moving on to the AFC West, a team first that we've talked about a lot, so we'll try and keep it a little bit shorter as far as talking about them. The Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning defending Super Bowl champions. Their over-under right now is sitting at 11.5 wins, and what's crazy is actually every year that Pat Mahomes has been the starting quarterback, they have always at least won 12 games, which has me a little concerned, to be honest, because that happened. What are the odds that it keeps rolling and Vegas keeps it at that same number? This offseason, they lost a lot of players. They really did. They lost McCole Hardman, Juju Smith-Schuster, Orlando Brown, which was a big one, Carlos Dunlap, Frank Clark, and Juan Thornhill. They really only added Juwan Taylor, and Donovan Smith in free agency. And Chris Jones, as of now, apparently they're very far out on a deal still. I mean, there's a lot of time, but it is late July now, so he probably won't be there by preseason.
Yeah, so, I think the Chiefs – I feel like everybody has the same view on the Chiefs, and I think everybody is correct. They're one of those teams that is going to be competing for not only the division but, potentially the number 1 seed in the AFC. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is a stud. The most concerning thing, as you said, is Chris Jones. My lean is that they're going to get something done with him. I just can't imagine them not. It's just a weird
Especially
time
after
of the
losing
year.
Frank Clark, too.
It's
Frank Clark, they're not going to let him go.
It's just a weird time of the year where, like, I wish that so full disclosure, I love the Chiefs. They're my I'm an Eagles fan, but I love the Chiefs as well. So I would say that the Eagles and the Chiefs are the 2 teams I know the most about, like even the lower end players or whatever. But this is something, as somebody who wants the Chiefs to be successful, I wish this is something, and they were kind of in talks, but I guess not serious enough talks. I wish they would have just figured this out, because this is something where, look, you have Mahomes, you're going to be competitive either way. But if you lose Chris Jones, I mean, he's literally, I personally think he's, Aaron Donald, obviously he's done it longer, and more consistently dominant. But I think that Jones, as a defensive tackle, has that upside to be the best defensive tackle in the league, and I think he was the best defensive tackle in the league last year. So losing him would really concern me. But like I said, I think that they're going to get that deal done. So I'm going to go with the assumption they have him. I like that they added another defensive end, Aduniki. I can't pronounce his name. Uzama, really athletic from Kansas State. I think that he's not going to be great early on in the season, but I think when it really matters for Kansas City towards the end of the season, I think he'll be a solid contributor. Another thing with the Chiefs, Kadarius Toney, they said he tweaked his knee. Now they're saying he partially jacked up his meniscus. They're saying that they were saying, oh, he got his knee touched up in the offseason, and then Andy Reid comes out and says, nah, he got it touched up, Monday. The report comes out Monday that he just had something done to his knee. So that's scary. I don't expect him for the start of the year. I think the earliest you would see him is week 2 because, they play in that Thursday night or so. The Chiefs are a team that are playing seasons, not games. I don't think that they'll risk him getting re-injured on Thursday when they can give him an extra 10 days of rest. So I think the earliest you'll see him is week 2. You think so? See, I think that it's going to be a great game, but I think that the Chiefs are going to drop a 40-piece on them. So I think it's going to be high scoring, but I think the Chiefs just completely dominate their defense. We'll get more into that as it comes closer. But one of the things that I've been hearing, looking into the training camp of the Chiefs, is that Sky Moore and Rashee Rice have both been really, really good. And that excites me. I think I've said it before on a previous episode of the podcast. I really think Sky Moore is going to take a step this year. I think he's going to be the guy next to Travis Kelce. Obviously not putting up similar numbers, but I think he will be a solid receiver 1 for this offense. And if Rashee Rice looks good, that to me just makes me feel even happier. I think that if he can come in and contribute right away, that Mahomes will make it work. One of the guys who I think is the X factor for this team, I like Noah Gray as well, but I actually think that the Chiefs are going to run a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets. And I mentioned this guy to you last year, but Jody Forson, he is so athletically gifted, and he knows where to be. He can line up anywhere. I feel like having him, I think this is going to be his best season. I think he's going to be, not crazy good, but I think he's going to be a solid contributor this year. So I don't think the offense is going to miss a beat, obviously. And, we'll see how I feel about the division when we get to the end. But I think that Kansas City is going to be obviously right there, one of the best teams in the league. And more than likely, even if they don't win this division, they'll be competing for a Super Bowl towards the end of January, either way.
I started the year pretty positive about the Chiefs. Obviously, I was happy that they won the Super Bowl. Just the more I look at their losses, I don't think that they did enough to address them. I mean, yes, Rice and Moore are getting some praise. However, Juju was still a former Pro Bowler. Mecole Harbin, a very fast player. Bringing in Richie James wasn't really enough to add up to that. If Tony is injured, I think the offense loses a lot of its, firepower and oomph. I think offensively, they're a Travis Kelce injury away from maybe being the worst offense, other than Mahomes, of course, out of the 3, the Chargers and them and the Broncos. Because without Kelce, it's just a bunch of first and second year receivers, which is very concerning. Having Clyde, who never really added up to anything, and Pacheco, who showed some, great sparks in the beginning. And then that's just the offense. I mean, defensively, losing Carlos Dunlap and Frank Clark, that's 2 guys up front. If Chris Jones, I think he will get signed, but if for some reason he's not there, their defense wasn't really that consistent last year. It kind of just ended up, they were so efficient in third down scenarios, but they were letting up chunks of yardage. They just ended up having things go right for them on the majority of occasions, and losing Juan Thornhill, just with the more weapons that are, on these other teams now, just to lose a piece in your secondary is very bad. I'm very concerned about the Chiefs. you'll probably be shocked as to how concerned I am about them when we get to our overall rankings. Up next, the team that I know you're super excited about, the Chargers right now. I love their win total right now. It's sitting at 9.5. I would definitely take the over on that. They added a lot of players last year, so in free agency this year wasn't really a big concern, but they still did get a decent piece with Eric Kendricks. They lost Kyle Van Noy, who didn't really get much time, so he wasn't necessary. They have a stacked D-line anyway. Drew Tranquil, Nasir Adderley, and Bryce Callahan, no real big losses, which is huge for a team that now brings in a new offensive coordinator. Drafted Quentin Johnson, who a lot of people would consider like a poor man's Julio Jones. Having that threesome at wide receiver is great. They just re-signed Herbert to a long-term extension. We knew it was going to happen. It was only a matter of time. Their defense, if healthy, is probably the most talented in the league. It's just we haven't ever seen them all be healthy at once. Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa is the scariest 1-2 punch in the NFL on the D-line. Their secondary is phenomenal. They just need to stay healthy. If this team stays healthy, the sky is really the limit for them with a quarterback who can pretty much make any throw that's really ever asked of him. And now that he has more weapons and a new offensive coordinator who loves passing the ball, I think that the Chargers have a really good chance at winning this division this year.
Yeah, and this is another team that I've spoken to, even going back to our very first podcast with our bold takes. I really like Justin Herbert and this team this year. To me, the biggest addition is Kellen Moore. And I've said the same point a few different times, but I really believe this, that Kellen Moore is a good offensive coordinator, but he can kind of get he kind of makes decisions to where with Dak, every once in a while, Kellen Moore can get kind of stuck in his ways. You think about that NFC Championship game. He said like 60% of the offense was relied on Tony Pollard. Well, you didn't have a backup plan. But so that is obviously a concern. But I think that giving Kellen Moore all of these weapons, and on top of that, Dak is a fine quarterback, obviously, but you give him one of the more talented quarterbacks in the league. I think Herbert is going to be able to overcome some of Kellen Moore's weaknesses. I think they're going to make an extremely exciting, great team, offensive coordinator, quarterback duo. I think they're going to have one of the best offenses in the league. And I really do, like you said, the defense comes down to health. Last year, they lost Bosa most of the year. They lost J.C. Jackson pretty much right away. Derwin James was out for a little bit.
Like Derwin James is never freaking healthy, and he's such a stud when he is healthy.
So it is a bit of a leap to say if they stay healthy, because they truly never are. But I mean, if they stay healthy, like they are one of the better rosters in the entire NFL. Quentin Johnson, I don't know if he's great, but I think as a number 3 receiver, I think even in a situation where just Mike Williams, now if they both get hurt again like last year, it's crazy to me. Last year, Williams was hurt, Allen was hurt, Herbert was hurt. The left tackle was hurt. Like there were so many injuries on that offense, and Herbert, while he wasn't explosive, he was still good enough to keep them in games, get them into the playoffs. But I think that Quentin Johnson is going to be a solid number 3 receiver. I think he can potentially fill in at the number 2 spot for short stretches of times. And one of the additions that I really like that they drafted, I don't think he's going to be some game breaker, but I like that they got Darius Davis from TCU as well, just to give them like another gadgety type guy. I think that'll be kind of exciting. I'm expecting him to, not a ton of plays, but I think like there'll be certain packages where teams will have to respect that he's on the field. But yeah, I think that their offense is going to be top 5 either way, unless, major injuries come. And I think that their defense is going to be, top 10, top 12 if they can stay relatively healthy. Mainly as long as they can keep, if just Bosa and Max stay healthy, in my opinion, and one of their corners, I think they'll be a top half of the league defense.
I agree. And talking about a defense that is going to also take steps forward this year, the Denver Broncos, and a team that overall should take a step forward this year. Not a lot of teams trade for coaches, but we just saw a head coach trade happen where we ended up bringing Sean Payton over to the Broncos. Love what they did in the offseason, bringing in Zach Allen, Frank Clark, Kyle Fuller, and the biggest sign of them all for them, Mike McGlinchey, who should hopefully protect Russell Wilson. They were beat up last year on the offensive line. This year they're getting back Garrett Bowles, Cushenberry, Ben Powers, and now bringing in McGlinchey. Their O-line should be significantly better than it was last year. We don't know what the hell happened with Russell Wilson last year. I think it was an experiment. For casual viewers, they can say that he's gone, he's washed, he lost it. Maybe I'm just a Russell Wilson fan, and that's why I want to say that it's just a bad scenario. Like you mentioned earlier, they lost a lot of one-score games, bad coach who ended up getting fired, the weapons not really being in sync. It's so weird for as good as Judy and Cortland Sutton both are. I feel like they just What was the last thing I said?
You said as something Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are, and then
Okay. As talented as Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy are, for some reason, I feel like they just cancel each other out. They just don't work well together. And that's why I think that this year it's going to be really important that the Broncos use their secondary pieces as well. Like Tim Patrick, like Dolchik. Dolchik showed a lot of promise at the end of last season. I'm really excited to see him. Now they bring in Marvin Mims. They already had KJ Hamler. Javonte Williams is going to be back at some point this season, bringing in Samaje Perine from the Bengals, who's a great passing back. This offense, I'm excited for it. I think that this offense overall is really stacked. And if their defense can stay healthy, I just wish they didn't trade Bradley Chubb away. Because if they didn't trade Bradley Chubb away, I would be shocked if this team didn't win 10 games. Now it's a little bit pressing to see if they can get there. But the rest of their defense is fine. I mean, they have a lot of players that they've drafted in the last couple of years, such as like Pat Surtain, who, have been good. They're starting to get elite. And now that they're hitting their prime, I think that's going to be great for the Broncos. I'm really excited for Denver this year. I think Russell Wilson gets his step back. I think bringing in Sean Payton is going to be great for the team as a whole. They just have too much talent to not succeed, or at least not break 9 wins.
Yeah, so I think that the Broncos are going to be one of those teams that the offense gets significantly better. I just don't know if it'll show up in wins and losses, just because I think the way I view the top two teams in this division, I think it's going to be tough to make any tread, certainly in like a playoff race. I think that the defense, it was so good last year that it more than likely takes at least a slight step backwards. And I think also part of the reason the defense was as good as it was last year is because teams got up, 14 points because the Broncos didn't score, and they were like, we can kind of get a little more conservative. So I think that the defense takes a step back just because they were so good last year. Not to say that they're going to be a bad defense. I still think they're going to be a good defense. But I agree. I think that this offense takes a step forward. I agree with you. I believe that Russell Wilson, just had a bad year, quite honestly. And I know that it's hard to just say, oh, he had a bad year and wipe it off. But we've seen it before, obviously not as bad of a year as Wilson had. But, what was it? It was 4 years ago now. Rodgers had kind of a down year, comes back, wins 2 MVPs in a row. Now, do I think Russell Wilson's going to win MVP? No. But I do think that the offensive line is better. Getting McGlinchey is a significant upgrade. I think if the offensive line holds up and can give Wilson time, I love the weapons on this team, quite honestly.
Are they going to ride?
Yeah, if they're and maybe Russ, if he's a little less corny, that might help the locker room tension a little bit. And Javonte and Perine, I think, is a great 1-2 punch. When Javonte gets back, as of right now, he's not on the pup, which is surprising, but doesn't necessarily mean he's going to start the year. that's a great 1-2 punch at running back. Judy, I think, is a very talented receiver. Sutton is a good, big X receiver. Probably overpaid, but he's still good. And I'm really big on Marvin Mims. I think I've said it before in one of our previous videos, one of our fantasy videos. He was extremely good at Oklahoma. Essentially every single year. He broke out as a freshman, and then he had 1,000 yards a couple times. I really like Marvin Mims, so he's the third wide receiver on that team, in my opinion. But you look at the 4 and 5, like KJ Hamler is a really good speed guy. Tim Patrick is just a reliable possession receiver. And then, like you said, Dolchich showed a lot of promise last year. And Alberto, however you say his last name, Akuibuam, he's extremely athletic. So for a second tight end, he's got a ton of upside. And, the biggest thing with this team is getting Sean Payton, a guy who, would I trade a first-round pick for any coach? No, personally not. I don't think that you should be trading picks for coaches. But I think that
it was like a panic button move.
Yeah, I think he's a top 10 coach in the NFL. Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think, but I feel very comfortable saying that. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't find 10 guys ahead of him. So I think that does create a lot of advantages inside the margins. And I actually, for them not having a first-round pick, I actually really like their draft class. I already spoke on Marvin Mims, but I actually really like Drew Sanders too. He only really has 1 year of production, but it's because he was on a stacked Alabama team. He goes to Arkansas and completely tears it up last year. And then Riley Moss, White Lightning over there, the corner. I kind of see him more as a safety in the NFL, but he's got the speed for corner. So I like their draft as well. I think, like I said, I really came around into a big circle of what I said at the beginning. I think that this team is going to be competitive week in, week out. I just don't know how many W's it's going to put up. I see the 7 to 9 range as well.
They ended up getting a pretty great schedule too. I mean, outside of playing the Chiefs and Chargers, the best thing, in my opinion, especially for Russell Wilson, is I think with his confidence, the way that it took a hit. Let's say they had to play Chiefs, Chargers, maybe like Eagles, Niners, their first 4 weeks. Expect shit from Wilson the rest of the season because he's just going to get torn up by the Denver media, and he's going to lose his confidence quick. The nice thing with them is that they get to play the Raiders, Commanders, and Bears in 3 of their first 4 matchups. Later on in the year, they get to play the Patriots. They play the Texans. They play, obviously, the Raiders again. They play the Lions. They don't play that many teams that I don't think that they should beat. I love the over-under at 8.5. I'm going to probably put a considerable amount of money on that. Like a lot, maybe 500 to 1,000. But moving on, we don't have much time left, so we'll breeze through this next team. Thankfully, it's a team that's easy to breeze through. The Raiders, another over-under, which take the under, and you will sleep the most comfortable you've ever slept in your entire life. Right now, it is at 7.5. There's not a shot in hell that the Raiders win 7 games. I wouldn't think there's a shot in hell that they win more than 4. Jimmy Garoppolo still isn't healthy. They really just they got rid of Derek Carr, who I just can't believe they would do that. A decent draft, a lot of questionable decisions. I know I personally like Mayer, but to take him at that spot was a little too high in the second round. The Raiders, Devontae Adams, who knows if he's going to hold out at some point in the season and just refuse to play because of the limited production that he's going to get. Josh Jacobs is holding out, and if I was the Raiders right now as a non-competitive team, I wouldn't sign him, and I don't even think he's that good to begin with. They lost some offensive linemen. They're just they're a shithole in my opinion. I think the Raiders are going to be in competition for the number 1 pick overall next year. I really like if there was an alternate under of like less than 3 games, I think I would take it. I just don't see this team doing much.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I still think Devontae Adams will be good. Quite honestly, your best case scenario for Adams, in my opinion, is you never wish an injury on somebody, but if either Garoppolo gets hurt or gets benched, because I think Aiden O'Connell, he was competent in college, and I think that he wouldn't be afraid to sling it around the yard more because he's trying to go out there and prove himself. So fantasy wise, I would hope for that if I was a Devontae Adams owner, which I am in one dynasty league. But
And I got rid of him in
as
our
a
league.
team, yeah, as a team in general, they have Crosby. I like I think the pass rush. It's weird because having Crosby next
Jones
to their
is there
pass rush,
too.
right there. That's what I'm saying. Their pass rush is it's one of the better duos in the league. So it's funny. I think that their pass rush is above average. But if one of those two guys goes down, it's kind of you only have one star, and I think that everywhere else on defense they're not going to be good. Quite honestly, I don't see their offensive line being. I think they'll be good, but not one of the top 5 offensive lines in the league where Garoppolo has all day to do whatever he wants. I saw that they restructured Jacoby Myers today to give a little more cap space. I was actually thinking if I'm the Raiders personally, they put themselves in a box where they made the playoffs 2 years ago, but they shouldn't have made the playoffs. They were really good in one-score games, and then last year they sucked because they suck. So then this year, the GM, it's new GM, new coach going into year 2. If they have another bad season, they're kind of on the chopping block, which sucks because if I'm a Raiders fan, I would want them to lean into sucking. But they restructured that. If I'm the Raiders, quite honestly, I know that Dalvin Cook probably isn't signed because he wants to get that, like $10 million a year is what they're floating out there, which he's not worth and he shouldn't get. But if I'm the Raiders, I'd be like, all right, Josh Jacobs, see you, man. And I just offer Dalvin Cook like a 1-year, $7 million deal and just call it a day. But that's just my little tidbit. As a team, like I said, I think they're going to suck. They lost their, Darren Waller. They literally I like Jacoby Myers. I think he's a solid number 2. I just don't think Garoppolo is very good. I think he was propped up by a great scheme and a great offensive line, and arguably the best.
And the Raiders have
league.
neither.
Yeah, the Raiders have none of that. So I think it's going to be an ugly year in Vegas. Sorry for fans of the Raiders, but I just don't see them being competitive whatsoever. And I agree. I would take, I would recommend an alternative win total under.
yeah, we're both high on the under. And here's the thing, and I kind of had this realization as I was looking at everyone's off seasons and just thinking about the NFL and how we've been talking about how the AFC is so stacked. As much as I would say that the Broncos and Chargers are going to take a step forward, I think overall as a division, I don't think the Chiefs are a 13-win team anymore. So I think overall as a division, it's going to be much more competitive than we think. I think that I could see 2 teams maybe winning 10, one winning 9, and the Raiders are the Raiders. But I think it's actually going to be more of a 3-way race. And I know I don't want to get in too much because we're going to be talking about the AFC North and AFC East. But as a whole, I think the AFC North and AFC East are both far better divisions now than the AFC West. I think the AFC West is now 3rd because, in my opinion, the Bengals, and that's just the threesome without the Raiders and Steelers included. But I would take the Bengals, Ravens, and Browns over the Chiefs, Broncos, and Chargers. And then if you throw in the Raiders, it would definitely lean AFC North. And then the Bills, Dolphins, and Jets, I think I would take over the first 3 as well. So I think there's a good chance that as much as we think that both the Chiefs and Chargers are going to make the playoffs, the wild card team in this division might actually not make the playoffs, and 2 from one of the other divisions might actually make it in. But that's just my little tidbit on a recap. But real quick, we'll get into the division predictions. I'm going to go with the Chargers taking the first spot, probably at 11 wins, 10 wins. I'm going to go the Broncos, number 2, around 10 or 11 wins. And then the
Wow.
Chiefs number 3 at like 9 or 10 wins. I think the Chiefs and the Broncos could flip at 2, just depending on which one of them wins games against each other. And then the Raiders, obviously, at the very bottom. I just don't see Mahomes, like, and this is part of the reason why I fell in love with him last year. He was just so goddamn magical. And watching him without Tyreek Hill and without as good of a defense, and like I said, I just think that he was so goddamn good last year, and their defense was more efficient than it had any right to be. I think that they're not winning more than 10 games this year. So as long as they can stiff arm the Broncos from winning 10, they could beat 2. But if the Broncos get more than 10 or 10, I think the Broncos beat them out for that 2 spot. But I love the Chargers. I'd say they're 1.
Okay, interesting, and yeah, that's something that you've moved over even since we started the podcast, which is kind of fun to see. But I've been saying it since that first video. I think that this is going to be the Chargers' year. I have them winning the division. KC second, Broncos third, Raiders fourth. I think that the Chargers and Chiefs are going to be in that 11 to 13 win range. I think both will probably end up making the playoffs because, like you said, those other divisions are tougher than the AFC West now, which helps them a little bit. But yeah, so I think that they're going to be close down to the wire. I think actually they play week 18, and I think it's going to end up deciding who wins the division. That game late in the year is going to decide the division. But I think that the Broncos are going to be, like I said, 7 to 9 win team, and I think the Raiders are going to be a 3 or 4 win team. So, I'm excited for this division to play out, especially now that you got the Broncos second. I didn't expect that whatsoever.
Yeah, I just looking at what they've done in the offseason, I'm all for it. And it's really more of an anti-KC take. I don't know. It's just something about seeing that every year that they've hit their over-under of 11.5 and that they haven't, like Vegas, you would think would adjust the line. It's making me think like it's a trap line. I don't know. We'll see. But everyone make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. And if you're on Spotify, make sure to subscribe as well and let us know how that's holding up. Listened to it the other day, went on a walk, and it sounded pretty good. So we expect to see you here next week. We're going to be covering the AFC and NFC East. Probably going to be the most lengthy podcast yet. It'll probably be like an hour and a half since both of those divisions have like a lot to talk about. So we'll see you there.